What's up, yo? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast, where we teach you the cheat codes to the game of life. I'm your host, Kiersten, aka Caption Red, and I hope you're doing well wherever you are. I'm doing well. I'm excited to roll out of 2020 with this being the last episode of the year. And 2020 has been a great year in regards to the podcast. Not the year I'd planned, not the year that any of us had planned. But of course, we need to focus on the good. And this podcast has definitely been a bright point in my life. Now, for the final episode of 2020, what I did is I took snippets from some of the great interviews that I did throughout the year. And I did this because there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom in these conversations. And these are some of the best nuggets of wisdom that have been said by the guests on this podcast. But of course, the entire interview for each of these guests was amazing. And I'll make sure to link each individual episode in the show notes. Now, the solo episodes are high quality as well. Definitely worth checking out. But for this episode, I decided to focus on what other people had to share. And these clips are some of the best knowledge bombs that were dropped this year on this podcast. We're going to start with my interview with health and fitness guru, Zach Potter. So I come across a lot of young people, and I tell every young man that I meet, I'm like, yo, just, work out, lift some weights. And I get a lot of apathy, right? Mm-hmm. I get a lot of, whatever, who cares? So how can exercise and taking care of your health affect your social life, your performance at school, your performance at your job if you have one, and just your overall future? Like what is the sales pitch that you would give someone who's like, not really interested?
Honestly, I do believe it's going to help you in every realm if you can kind of open your mind to that. I honestly think the decision is a step before that. Sometimes, we're looking at this one small area. Should I choose this or choose that? But sometimes we have to back up and realize the decision we made before that. And you talked about that apathy, lack of caring. Truth be told, if you actually care about yourself and you say, I want to love myself, I want to be able to do something good here on this earth, the next kind of thing you confront is wisdom, intellect. Okay, well, how do I do that? And the truth, and we can find study after study, if you exercise, align your body, get yourself in cardiovascular health, find your posture, eat food that does not destroy you and take away your energy. There's so many layers that we can put on all of these things, and it's almost self-evident. They are going to allow you to do better. No matter what you do, you are going to be a better version of that, bar none. The problem is that it's hard, and that is the thing. And that's why what I always tell people when they first start is I say, you got to find your why. Because I can give you a lot of what and a lot of how, but until you find your why, you're going to be apathetic to it. You're not going to want to go there. So to me, it's really important to find your why. And that's not even looking at the exercise. That's literally looking back at yourself and saying, what do I want in my life? Because if you really turn that mirror on yourself and you start goal storming, the next logical steps are going to be that a lifestyle of health and wellness is going to make you go faster, go more full to that goal. So that's where I start, is all the way back from the core. Start at the heart.
Here's part of my interview with stand-up comedian Damon Sumner. As a guy who's figured himself out and then has become successful by many measures, what is like a success principle, a success habit that you picked up as you were on your journey that just has really revolutionized your life?
The two I'm going to say are not anything that's groundbreaking, but I think the principles and the habits have led to pretty much most, if not everything, that I've been able to fortunately be a part of in my career, which is one, like really asking and not waiting, like in the sense of like, with my shows that I run in the city, I run some really cool shows and different type of venues. And I appreciate that. I'm excited about that. Like everything came from me just sending the email. I wasn't waiting around for me to be discovered or for somebody to email me or call me. I sent the emails. The initiative, I guess, is really the word I want. Take the initiative. Like that's just been something. If I could put it into a little bumper sticker, take the initiative. Like that habit of me, like the cruises I talked about, the colleges I talked about. Those are two different agencies. That was me emailing them. That was me putting in that work at night or in the morning or on the train, researching, putting those agencies into a database, emailing everybody, and then, hoping for the best. And I wasn't waiting for them to email me back because I was still working and grinding. But when they did, I was ready to put in the work. And so just really taking the initiative to do. Like right now, I'm kind of researching and kind of getting ready to, work on a pilot this year. That's one of my big goals is at least one pilot this year. And so yeah, it's something where I'm like, all right, I got to take the initiative. I'm researching, I'm reading pilots, I'm asking people about pilots. Even in that sense, I'm taking the initiative to reach out to people about their work as writers. Like, I have friends who are TV writers. So why am I sitting back? Damon, take the initiative, hit them with an email. They're good people. They're kind people. They'll share what they know. So yeah, that's one principle that I think has been really crucial for me, that I've really been really honest, being able to see the fruit of it. It's just, take the initiative, man. Go get it.
Now, here's some knowledge bombs that were dropped by spoken word poet Shihan Van Clief. And with writing and poetry, I had a friend, some years back that actually took one of your classes over there at the Poetry Lounge. And one of the things that she said that stuck out to me is you said consistency every day. Like that is what helped you to become the award-winning lauded poet that you are. So can you talk a little about that and the importance of consistency?
Oh yeah, I'm huge on consistency. I think, and I feel like it's a cliche coming out of my mouth now because I say it so much, but I feel consistency is the biggest thing lacking in our social structure. And that's why people are comfortable with half-assed things. And that's why we are, as a culture and a country, where we're at because of inconsistency. And so I try to be as consistent as I can. I set, when it goes from being passion to a career, there's a self-discipline that's involved with understanding that and making the necessary adjustments to my behavior so that I can take full advantage of what it is I want to do. So I set times where, now obviously we're shut down because of this whole virus thing. But when my kids are in school, I literally take them to school. I come back home. I turn off my phone. I turn off my internet, and I write basically from 9 to 2. Or I sit in front of my computer. Or I try to come up. I ideate whatever I need to do. I need to work on that every day, and I keep a consistent schedule to what it is I do. So the days that I'm not teaching out in Palmdale, I'm in my schedule, in my in front of my computer, working on my art. And I think that's super important because writing is an exercise. Writing is an exercise. You need to work it out until it gets worked out. And by any means necessary, I'm going to do what it is so that I succeed. And in that success, and in the pursuit of success, the failures that come along with that are fine, because to me, they're all part of the process of learning learning as much as I can. So I want to learn and I want to push myself. And I know I'll fail along the way, but I'm going to keep going. So self-discipline and consistency with your self-discipline is important.
Right. Here's part of my interview with hip-hop violinist Lucine Fyelon. So knowing what you know about your own personal success and knowing what you know about the success of, or lack of success of, people that you've kind of seen as musicians, what do you think makes a musician successful? And success is, that's maybe the wrong word, because some people are brilliant and they don't have commercial success, but the ones that I guess live up to their potential, what is the difference between a musician that makes a great career for themselves, and again, not necessarily commercially successful, but they live up to their potential is what I'm trying to say. And what makes a musician become a great musician, and what are some of the things that you've seen of people who don't end up living up to their potential?
I think it's a choice. I think whatever choice the musician makes, that's what they do. If they don't feel like they really have to go after it, and they don't, and then nothing really happens. But if you really want it, it doesn't matter how good you are or bad, like you get there. I think you just have to really, if you really want it, you have to really work hard at it. And it's not easy. It's really hard because it makes you might have to change yourself a little bit to adjust to be able to work harder.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a choice that every musician has to make. What kind of a success do they want? What is success to them? And at the end, I think it's more about being happy to me than successful. If success makes you happy, you should do it. But if it doesn't make you happy, I don't think you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, there's probably some musicians that are talented, but it's just not necessarily for them, is kind of what you're saying.
Maybe they just don't feel good about being in the public. It does happen, actually. I know great musicians who, they're like, hey, I don't want attention. I just want to play. I want to feel good.
Sure.
And there are different types of musicians out there. Being famous doesn't mean it's the only way to be successful. There are, other ways too, just like you said. But yeah, you just have to know yourself to know what you really want. Sure. And not try to follow somebody just because you see that they're doing good. You need to, I think, know what makes you personally happy with whatever you choose to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that from people who are in music. They say, don't do it unless you can't not do it, because it's not easy. It's a long road, and you're on the road a lot, which is great in some ways, but also I imagine it becomes a grind eventually. So
yeah, it does. It's just not just the roads. Like, even if you're a musician that creates new music, let's say, you're always being judged all the time. You never know the type of music that you write. You don't know if people are going to like it or not. So it's always like you wonder.
Sure.
Yeah. It's emotionally, some people can't take it because it's hard. It's like, oh my God, what do you do? But then if you really love what you're doing, you love creating and you like it yourself, you personally like your own music, then you should always do it. You should never stop just because, you will find an audience for every type of music, I think.
Sure, absolutely. And with there's a lot of praise that comes with being a performer. There is, some criticism, and, that at least that insecurity of people not liking what you're doing and whatnot. And so how do you handle and process that? Because I know that when I've put stuff out and I'm just like, you understand, there's like this turmoil is the best word I can use for it. And it's like, and then but it's out there.
Exactly. You don't know what to expect. You're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? You can't do anything about that. You just can't. You just have to accept the way things are. I think what you can do is make sure that you like it personally, that you did everything that you wanted to do. And just don't take it too seriously, I would say.
Yeah. And
it's not life or death. You can write another one.
That is true. And it's funny, I listen to Conan O'Brien's podcast a lot, and when he first came out, people hated him.
Really?
Oh, they took him straight to the sewer with all their criticism. It was terrible. And it was just one of those things that he just kind of had to fight through that and continue to make art. And now people love him. But anyhow.
Exactly. If you believe in the art, you should go for it. Just make it.
Here's part of my interview with Julien and Kiersten from Rich and Regular. So, you're both out of the workforce now, but in order to get to where you are, you had to be in the workforce and you had to be successful in the workforce in order to eventually both call it quits and retire. So what are some of the principles and habits that you did as you were coming up? Obviously saving money for both of you. But besides that, like what were some of the things that helped you to be successful so that you could build this brand and eventually just stop working?
For me, it was about all of the peopling that comes with work. So I didn't always work in a corporate environment. I started my career in retail. I was a manager at several Target stores for almost 5 years. Mm-hmm. And what I learned from being in a real-time environment where you're talking to people constantly all day is that people are all that matters. Even when you're sitting behind a screen, moving numbers, building PowerPoint decks, when you move to like the big corporate job, it's still all about relationships. And so making sure that you're authentic and you're genuinely curious and interested in your coworkers and colleagues has led me to more opportunities and more advocacy at work where people would bring things to me. Like if there was an open job or one that was coming, they would bring it to me. Or if I needed help or a recommendation for an interview, they would gladly do that. I feel like my relationships with people has helped me far more than, my acumen in marketing or my ability to do advanced calculus or any of the other things that I learned in school. The fact that I just have a lot of people that have my back and that I have theirs has made work way more enjoyable and made me way more successful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, being the opposite of self-centered actually works out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it just costs nothing to be kind. Just be kind to people.
Absolutely. Julien, how about you?
So it's clear that she is the more bubbly and optimistic one. I am on the other end of the spectrum, but I think the insight is just as helpful. And so one of the keys I would say to my success is to be perpetually dissatisfied with where you were. I just always believed that I could do better, whether it was sports or whether it was at a job. I could not stand the idea that there was a limit to what I could do. So I just always knew that there was more out there. And honestly, I struggled early on with income limits because I felt that if I'm doing well, I feel like I should be compensated more for that. And so I struggled with work, but my struggle is actually part of the things that helped me to be very successful because I was able to get into a role, even if I knew nothing about it. And work really, really hard, master that role, and then move on to the next thing. And so after a while, I realized that, hey, you may not even always have opportunities to climb ladders when you're reliant on someone else to give you a paycheck. And so what I learned towards the latter part of my career was that once you get to a certain point, it's actually up to you to build your own ladder outside of work. That way, if the ladder that you're on is ever taken away from you, or if it's lost for whatever reason, you have something that you can rely on. And so that ladder for us is the Rich and Regular brand and website. But it's something, Kiersten mentioned, we launched it in 2017, but a lot of the thinking and the strategy and the thought work was in our minds as early as 2015. And so we were chipping away at it slowly but surely for over 2 years before we shared anything with the public. And even when we did, there were 3 blog posts up on the website and we were like, keep in touch, there's more coming. And we just hung in there. And, today we can say it's been a very successful experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you shared that it took you 2 years to kind of ideate because, oftentimes people will look at a blog and be like, oh, so they just typed up some words. And then and then next thing you know, they're all over TV. So very cool. Here's a snippet of my interview with licensed professional counselor, Jared Pogue. And speaking of which, you just mentioned mindfulness and meditation. So a lot of people don't meditate. I think more people are now during these times just because you got to do something to keep yourself sane. So what do you tell people who are resistant or just kind of can't get into the habit of meditating, right? I think that's the hardest part, is developing the habit in the first place. So what would you tell them?
Yeah, so one of the first things I really intentionally aim for is not to use the word meditate.
Right.
I find that it can come with a lot of baggage or expectation, or it is a loaded term. And for some people, that's a positive loaded term, and for some people, it's negative. If you have an established practice or routine of meditation, then it's going to come with a positive feeling. It's going to come with a positive expectation. If you've got a negative picture of it, obviously it's going to come with negative. You're going to be avoidant of it. Most people are somewhere in the middle of those two things, that they probably have some friends that do meditation and they say great things, but they've also heard various things about meditation. And they're like, well, I don't know if that's really going to be for me. So one of the first things I would say is I try not to push people to the word meditation. Instead, I push them to the idea of mindfulness. Mindfulness is essentially the exact same thing, or at least very similar. You could say it is technically a part of meditation, but I do like to differentiate it just a little bit. Mindfulness is simply being connected to yourself, being aware of yourself. It is using, if you want to be super psychological, it is using your frontal lobe as a way of grounding yourself within reality. Sure. Doesn't sound as fun, but
no,
it is
not at all.
Yeah, it is just a way of being very present in the moment, is the best way to describe that. And so the first place to begin is, there's lots to be anxious about. I'm not here to lie or say otherwise. There's tons to be anxious about on a social system perspective. There's tons to be anxious about on a personal system perspective. That's all waiting for you. But during times of mindfulness, that can sort of be put on the back shelf in the background. You can take these little moments and make something beautiful of them. In fact, not even just make something beautiful, but actually see something beautiful there. That's usually the invite that I want to give to people. There's something really great here if you can push this aside for now. It is still there. It's still going to be waiting for you. I'm not asking you to check out for the rest of your life. I'm just kind of asking for 5 minutes here.
Right.
The next thing I push to people with mindfulness is the idea that it does not have to be, all right, let me clear my schedule, go to this part of my room, fold my legs up, or do this. Like, I do it sitting in a chair while I'm eating toast, right? Like, I sort of discussed that one earlier a little bit. It can be done anywhere, in any sort of position, at any given time, no matter what's going on around you. You can be at work, take literally just sort of turn off your computer screen or look away from it or something like that, to take 2 minutes and just begin to, and this can sound like a really difficult process, but it can be easier than you think, sort of shut your mind off a little bit, shut up the productivity part of your mind, and instead just kind of quite literally physically feel what's there. As I'm talking to you, I'm sitting on a couch right now, and I sort of check out I go into my mindfulness mode. I'm just kind of aware of the moment. I can actually feel each individual fiber of the couch on my leg. Right. And then I just kind of concentrate on that. I'm just, I'm not trying to do anything with it. I'm not trying to give it a label. I'm not trying to define it as positive, negative, uncomfortable, comfortable, anything like that. I'm just accepting that it's there. I'm just feeling that it's there. What's it like to feel each one of these fibers on my leg? Is there one that's more pressing than another? Is there one that is stands out or that is uneven? What am I feeling, right? Sometimes I push people to do things like, what does your fingertips feel like? How do they feel against each other? And just to push the sort of like pads of your fingers somewhat gently together, right? You're not trying to squish something here. You're just feeling the actual pads of your fingers as a way of just stopping your mind from being productive, right? That's a really easy way, I think, to get to this. Mindfulness sounds really scary and difficult. I actually think it can be once you remove a lot of the barriers of things like meditation as a term, or the challenges and the difficulties, I think it really does boil down to just, I'm taking the productivity part of my brain, I'm taking the future part of my brain, or even the past part of my brain, and I'm just pushing it to the side a little bit, right? I'm letting it take a breather so I can see whatever's in this moment, right? So that could be where you're sitting, you're feeling an air conditioner just kind of run up against your face, and you can feel that air, right? It could be feeling the fabric of your own clothes. Have you ever thought about how your clothes feel on your back? How does your shirt feel right now? How do your pants rub up against your legs, right? Are you wearing socks, and what are they like around your feet? What is your middle toe feeling right now, right? This is stuff we never think about. at all. And so I think they're great pathways to getting our brains to quiet down just to see what's there. From there, it really is just every time your brain starts to go to a place of, I'm thinking about this COVID anxiety, what's going to happen with my job. That's fine. Your brain's going to do that. It's okay. Make peace with that. And just kind of return to something. That's why I offer these ideas of like, what does this feel like right now? Right? Basing a lot of these questions in the right now, sure. As well as focusing on the breath. The breath is really amazing in the human body. Believe it or not, like one of the best things you can do to cope with anxiety or depression at any given moment is literally taking big breaths. Slow, big breaths is physiologically and psychologically speaking, like the absolute best calming experience that anybody can have. It has to do with this thing called the vagus nerve. I'm not really going to get into it too much. But this is not a science podcast. I'm not
right. No, but that's yeah. Good.
If you can't do anything else to begin to capture mindfulness, the biggest thing I'd say is stop, take these big breaths, and feel them go in and out. What do they feel like as they go in? What do they feel like as they go out? Mm-hmm. And just awesome, man. Yeah, just continually going back to that. Your brain again is going to go somewhere else. Just continue to go back to the breaths. I think is one of the best ways I'd get people to begin doing mindfulness in a day-to-day basis.
Right. So sounds like one of the things that I'm hearing from you is just do it where you can. Do it like, with whatever you got in front of you, where you can, how you can, that whole thing. So that's awesome.
I like to describe it as there's a million opportunities and you certainly do not need to grab all of them. Just a couple are fine.
Yeah.
So, there may be a few select people out there that do have to put that onto their to-do list. But I think for most people, it is making a conscious choice to take that moment just to breathe for 1 minute, 2 minutes. Don't demand a lot of time of yourself, but doing a number of these micro exercises, as it were, these micro exercises can be absurdly more beneficial than if you had taken 30 minutes or an hour to sit there and listen to someone like Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's a meditation and mindfulness expert. Those little moments are often worth way more than just one big moment in the morning.
Sure, absolutely. And that's the thing that I do when I meditate. I'm just like, all right, dude, just do it for 3 or 5 minutes, just just get something in. So, and that's, same thing I do with exercise. A little bit of something is better than none. So
exactly.
Very cool. Here's a part of my interview with positive psychologist, Robert Zietlin. So what is positive psychology?
Yeah, it's kind of the joke that I say is it's kind of reverse psychology, right? Like psychology is about sadness and depression and anxiety and how do you help people. And, so it's really a problem solving science, or it's a problem solving specialty, at least the way it's been practiced for the last 100 years, because people have problems and psychologists are uniquely suited to solve them, to diagnose them and actually to treat them. And one of the things about problem solving is you need a problem to have to solve. Positive psychology grew up in the last 20 or so years, and it's grown on the other side of the hill, basically the hill that the sun hits, where you think about the things that actually make you feel happiness and the things that make you thrive and the things that encourage you to flourish in your life. And so positive psychology is not taking you up off the ground when you stumbled and brushing you off. But basically, that's the only skill that I had before I hit positive psychology is I could get you off the ground and brush you off and say, okay, go back to work. Good job. Or get back on the field. But now I meet people where they are and I help them create an upward spiral and take off from there.
Yeah, that's great. And I love all of that because it just sounds like we're working on fun and we're working on, just endorphins and all that good stuff. I do have a question about positive psychology and becoming happier. What makes people happy, or what makes people happier?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I work with a lot of parents and they come to me and ultimately their single most important purpose, I just want to raise a happy kid. But happiness is one of those destinations you don't actually buy a ticket to. It's something you work towards. And so what makes people happier is actually exercising their character strengths. And I've relabeled them superpowers because they just strike me that way. There's 24 of them in positive psychology, things like curiosity and creativity. And the research shows that happiness comes from building those kind of strengths, creating habits where you use them every day. When people talk about, if you find your ideal job, then you'll never work a day in your life or something like that. Mm-hmm. If you actually exercise these strengths, that's what it is about those jobs, that you're actually exercising your character strengths, not just doing a job that feels good, but you're actually growing and becoming stronger yourself. So that's how you get to happiness, is actually practice these character strengths.
That's great. And it sounds like there's a lot of science behind the character strengths. So where did they come from? I mean, I guess they've always been around, but who decided, these were the 24 and that evolved for us to understand it?
Right. You're exactly right. They've always been around. The 24 were actually found in plain sight by a team that culled through over 3 years, a 3-year research study that culled through all the great histories, all the great philosophies, all the great religious texts, from the Bible to the Quran to the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, all of these across different cultures and across different times. What were the virtues that came out most often and most frequently? And they pulled out the 24 that were most common and most prominent, and then they organized them and categorized them. That's how they got the 24 strengths that form the basis of the research in positive psychology.
Yeah, that's great. And I took the test because you sent it to me. And I got a few of my top characteristics, which is honesty and creativity, which was, I guess, neither one of those were surprises to me. So why is it important to know what your character strengths are? I mean, because there's 24 of them. I mean, we all got them. So why is that important?
Right. And the cool part about the results you got from that survey was, these are your top strengths, these are your middle strengths, these are your bottom strengths. Everyone always goes to the bottom, like, where am I weak in? But actually, if you look at the top and you find things like honesty and creativity, and you figure out ways to use them more, the reason they're important is, if you can find, in terms of your listeners, a career or a job or something that allows you to exercise character strengths you enjoy using, then you not only end up doing a good job, but you actually end up feeling gratified and growing your inner strength too. So the important part is, it's actually, believe it or not, it's not important to know what's at the top or the bottom, just which ones you want to exercise more. I've actually had people I've worked with pick the very top strength and say, tell me how we can create a habit around this. And I've had people look at that list and at the last one, because really you're just ranking them yourself, right? You just went through the survey and you said, this sounds like me, this doesn't sound like me, this sounds a little like me. And then they rank according to how you've rated those questions. So this person took the very bottom one and said, creativity is something I used to do, but I don't really do anymore. Can we find out a way to do that? And the cool part is, when we sat down with her friends and designed a plan, they're all like, what do you mean you're not creative? You're the most creative person we know. And so sometimes we don't even sort of see these things in ourselves, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you pick your top or your bottom strength, as long as you're just finding ways to use it every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like you can maybe try to turn one of your weaknesses into a strength, or at least get it higher on the pecking order, perhaps.
Definitely.
No, that's great. I love that. And finally, here's part of my interview with spoken word poet Asia Samson. Speaking of poetry and your subject matter of poetry, you talk a lot about the disappointments that you've had in your life. You talk a lot about some really tough things that you've been through, whether it's the cancer, whether it's, miscarriages, your sister passing. How did you deal with those, huge life events? Because those are the things that, rock you to your core. And so I think in this day and time, everybody needs to understand how to cope and process things. So what's your process like with that?
Well, it's true that we have more depressed people in this generation than we've ever had in history. Either that or we just weren't counting back then. or we didn't diagnose for that then. But it's true that there's a lot more to be depressed about now, especially with the state of the world. And with us being able to be online, we can feel more negativity than we ever have, right? For me, I mean, look, let me first say that, yes, those are the most horrible things to have happened that can happen to somebody. Mm-hmm. And you know, some people, okay, well, I experienced death. And somebody might say, well, I experienced miscarriages. And another person might say, well, I experienced cancer. But then when you experience all of it, you know, constantly, it's just like, my God, like I look back, like, how did I survive that? I look back on it now. I was telling my wife, like, man, we went through some things and I'm still in awe of the fact that we're still ticking, right? Like, how did I not go into the corner and off myself right after all of that?
Sure.
That being said, that's what life is. Life is going to do that. Life is going to throw these curveballs at you, and life is going to be harder for some than others. And let me not say harder, because what's hard for me may not be anything to someone else, but what they might be going through might be nothing to me. So let me just start there. I will say though that, I mean, life becomes interesting when we are challenged. Life is interesting when we are put through the rigors, right? I mean, diamond can't happen without pressure. Blades can't be sharp unless they're put through fire. I mean, there's just all these things that unless you go through something, you just don't know what you're made of, right? You don't know what your metal is, right? Until you go through it. And so for me, I've gone through those type of things, and yes, they're hard, and God, they're painful. But at the same time, it's also shaped me to be the person who I am. All the things that I have right now are also as a result of those things happening. So it's hard for me to be like, well, you know, this would have sucked because this shouldn't have happened, because then would my life have turned out to be the same way? Like, would I have a career right now if I didn't go through cancer, right? Mm-hmm. And cancer, in a way, saved my life. Now, do I want cancer to come back? Obviously not, right? Sure. But it's really how you respond. And so to me, when I talk to people, I'm like, yeah, it may not get better now, it may not get better tomorrow, it may not get better next year, but it will get better. But your job is to see it through. The worst that can happen is you're going to die, right? But the fact that you haven't died yet, the fact that you're still here, then don't try to rush that process of death. Just stick it out. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you're going to die. Well, you're going to die anyway, right? So stick it out, see what happens, see how your story unfolds. It's like reading a book and then halfway through going, okay, it's getting crazy now, I'm putting this book away. Well, you never know how it ends. You know?
Absolutely.
Your story is still being written. Your story is still being written. In this moment, your story is still being written. And until you see it through to the end, it may seem unbearable right now, but hey, man, the best movies, the best stories, they always put the character through something before they come out on the other side. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's an amazing thought. And I 100% agree with you as, you know, someone who's, you know, had my own situations in life and, you know, come out on the other end. All right. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from it. That is the last episode of the year, but I will hit the ground running first week of January. All right. So here's to an amazing holiday season for you and your loved ones, and to a great new year in 2021. It's going to be a great year. It'll be great to have a year with a vaccine on the horizon and things slowly returning to normal. But as I say this, remember, we are still in a pandemic. Remember to be careful out there and make sure that you're protecting yourself and others. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe and also share it with a friend of yours who you think would get a lot from it. All right, so that's all I got for this episode. I hope you have an amazing end of 2020. And until next time, peace. Bye, young lady.